Washington was never happy about this. He thought it interfered with the professional army, but he never sent these women home. One reason he never sent the women and the children home was he knew that their husbands would follow them. Desertions went down when women were present. When a man was certain that his wife was safe, his children were safe, he was not likely to abandon the Continental Army. Secondly, women did absolutely vital chores for the Army. They were the unofficial quartermaster corps of the Army. They did sewing, they did laundry, they gathered the wood for fires, they cooked the food, they nursed the men when they were sick. And some of what they did was absolutely essential to keep the men battle ready. One of my favorite stories always is the story of lice, that the boys who joined the Army, and they were young boys, 15, 16, 17 years old, apprentices or farm boys who came into the Army in the clothes that were on their backs. And like teenage boys probably everywhere, they didn't think about washing their clothes. And so they lived for weeks in their clothes, and they got lice. And I guess like boys everywhere, when they got lice and they itched, they scratched, and they scratched so much that they had scabs all over their bodies. They still didn't wash their clothes. And they were bored sitting around doing nothing, because a lot of warfare is sitting around and doing nothing, especially in the winter, because armies normally didn't fight in the 18th century in the winter. And so the boys made up a game, and one of the games they made up was throwing hot tar at the lice all over their body and then counting up who had killed the most lice. So now they had scabs and they had burns all over their bodies. And the men who were responsible for reporting whether the soldiers were battle ready would often have to say, well, I have 5 young men who are so scarred and so scabby and that they are not battle ready. Well, Washington and commanders everywhere realized that what they needed was women to do the laundry. And if the Army was on the move and they didn't have wives and daughters, every town they went through, they hired women to be laundresses. This was one of the most important things that the Army could do, is to find women who would do laundry for both the officers and for the men. So Washington made very good use of the women who came into the Army camps. Still, if you read his order books, you can see how frustrating it was for him. At one point, he's trying to move the Army quickly, and he records, I was trying to move, but we had 8 women who were giving birth, and so we had to stay until the children were born. So for him, it was a logistical nightmare, but it was also a benefit to the Army. Now, most of the women who came into the Army camps were their wives and sweethearts and daughters of ordinary farm men or urban workers, and they were poor. They got half rations compared to the men, and so they were themselves often a little ragged by the time the winter was over. And observers, women who wrote in their diaries as the Army marched through their towns, often described these women as harrigans, as wild-looking, dirty women whose hair was uncoiffed, which it certainly was, whose clothes were in tatters, who looked dirty and exhausted. And that's exactly what these women were, because they were working quite hard all winter long with very little sustenance and very little comfort. They slept in the tents with the men. So camp followers are a very important set of participants in the American Revolution. That picture of Valley Forge as an all-male encampment denies and silences the reality that women are a crucial part of the American Army.